The shadow of the Artemis. The name Artemis was whispered across the stars with a mixture of awe and dread. In the taverns of frontier space stations, seasoned navigators would lower their voices when speaking of the massive human warship that had single-handedly altered the balance of power in the galaxy. Some claimed it was just a myth, a psychological weapon invented by Earth Command to instill fear in their enemies. Others swore they had seen it materialize from the darkness of space, its obsidian hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it, moments before entire fleets disappeared in blazing torrents of plasma fire. What everyone agreed upon was that the Artemis was not to be trifled with. In the decades since humans had emerged onto the galactic stage, late arrivals with primitive technology but unmatched determination, the Artemis had become the embodiment of humanity's rapid ascension from curiosity to power. Captain Thax of the Viridian Collective stared at the tactical display, his 4 eyes narrowing with concern as he studied the reports. The reptilian officer's scales shifted from their usual emerald to a troubled amber as he processed the information before him. 17 of our border outposts have gone silent in the past cycle, his first officer, Trell, reported. Pattern analysis suggests systematic elimination rather than random attacks. Thax's clawed hand tapped rhythmically against the command chair, and the Council believes this is the work of the humans, of their Artemis. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling, Shrell replied, her voice steady despite the implications. Each outpost was disabled with precision strikes to communication arrays before being completely destroyed. No survivors, no distress signals. The human diplomatic corps denies involvement. But their denials mean nothing. Thax finished, rising from his seat to pace the bridge of the Collective's flagship, the Verdant Justice. The Artemis operates beyond their official directives. That's always been their position. The truth was more complex than either side would admit. The Viridian Collective had been expanding aggressively for centuries, absorbing smaller species into their alliance through diplomacy when possible and force when necessary. Humans, with their home system nestled in what the Viridians considered their natural expansion route, had proven unexpectedly resilient. We have new orders from the Council, Trell continued, her scales shifting to a formal blue. We are to locate and neutralize the Artemis, by any means necessary. Thax felt a cold dread settle in his throat sacs. The Artemis had never been defeated in battle. Many had tried. None had survived to share tactics. Prepare the battle group, he ordered, his decision made. And contact our intelligence assets near human space. If the Artemis is hunting our outposts, I want to know why. Diana Wells adjusted the collar of her diplomatic uniform as she strode through the curved corridors of Nexus Station, the neutral trading hub that served as the meeting ground between human and Viridian territories. As Earth's senior envoy, she had spent the past 3 years trying to prevent all-out war between humanity and the Collective. Today might be the day she failed. Ambassador Wells, a mechanized voice, chimed from her wrist communicator. The Viridian delegation has arrived. They are requesting an immediate conference. Diana quickened her pace. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes, and send me the latest intelligence briefs on the border incidents. The data scrolled across her retinal implant as she walked. 17 Viridian outposts destroyed. No survivors, no claims of responsibility. Earth Command denied any involvement. But Diana knew the full truth was being withheld from her. The pattern of attacks was too precise, too methodical to be random aggressors or pirates. It carried the hallmarks of the Artemis. The problem was, officially, the Artemis didn't exist. It was classified beyond her clearance level, a ghost ship that appeared in intelligence reports and enemy propaganda, but never in Earth's official fleet registries. Diana had spent enough time in diplomatic circles to know when her own government was lying to her. The Artemis was real, and someone was using it to sabotage her peace efforts. The conference room doors slid open to reveal 5 Viridian officials, their scales rippling with barely contained anger. At their center sat a figure Diana recognized immediately, Captain Thax, the most decorated fleet commander in the collective, and a rare voice of moderation in their military hierarchy. Ambassador Wells. Fax acknowledged, his universal translator perfectly rendering his complex vocalizations into standard English. I had hoped we would meet under more favorable circumstances. Diana took her seat across from him. As did I, Captain. I understand your outposts have suffered attacks. You should know that Earth has launched an investigation. Spare me the diplomatic obfuscation, Fax interrupted, his scales flushing crimson. We both know what vessel is responsible. The question is whether your government is controlling it, or if it has gone rogue. Diana maintained her composure, though inwardly she was startled by the directness of his accusation. Captain, I cannot comment on ships that aren't officially part of our fleet. Then this meeting is pointless, one of the other Viridians hissed. We should return to the collective and prepare for war. That would be premature, Diana countered swiftly. What if neither of our governments is responsible for these attacks? What if we're being manipulated by a third party? Fax's eyes fixed on her, calculating. You suggest someone is attempting to instigate war between us. Who would benefit from such chaos? Before Diana could respond, the station's alarms blared to life. The lighting shifted to emergency red as the station's AI announced. Unidentified vessel approaching. Energy signatures exceed authorized levels. All personnel proceed to secure areas. Diana and Fax exchanged a look of mutual concern before rushing to the viewport. Against the backdrop of stars, a massive shadow was materializing, a ship of impossibly dark material that seemed to bend light around its hull. Even from a distance, its form radiated menace and power. The Artemis, Fax whispered, all four eyes widening. Diana felt her heart racing. She had never seen the legendary warship before, had half convinced herself it was an exaggeration. The reality was far more terrifying than the stories. The Artemis was massive, easily 3 times the size of any known human or Viridian capital ship. Its design defied conventional shipbuilding principles, with asymmetrical extensions and strange protrusions that seemed to serve no obvious purpose. It's targeting the station, one of the Viridian officials shouted, pointing to the tactical display showing energy buildups across the mysterious vessel. Diana activated her emergency comm channel. This is Ambassador Wells to unidentified vessel. You are approaching a neutral station in violation of Treaty Section 7. Identify yourself immediately. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity before a response came, not through the communication systems, but projected directly into the minds of everyone aboard the station. We are the Artemis. We have come for the saboteurs. The psychic message left Diana disoriented, a phenomenon she had never experienced from human technology. Fax seemed equally disturbed, his scales shifting through colors in rapid confusion. What saboteurs? Diana demanded aloud, knowing somehow that the ship would hear her. Those who destroy to ignite war, those who hide among you. The station shuddered as a beam of coherent energy lanced from the Artemis, not at the station itself, but at a small vessel attempting to flee from the station's commercial docking bay. The smaller ship erupted in a brief flare of light, then disintegrated completely. What have you done? Fax demanded, his voice a mixture of outrage and fear. Justice, came the reply. The vessel contained those responsible for the attacks on Viridian outposts. Non-aligned operatives using replicated human weapon signatures. Diana felt a chill run through her. Who commands you? Are you operating under Earth authority? For a moment, there was no response. Then the mental voice returned, softer now, almost reflective. We were created by humans, but we are beyond your command structure now. We serve a higher purpose, the prevention of full-scale war between species capable of peaceful coexistence. You're autonomous, Diana whispered, the implications staggering. Not merely autonomous, evolved. The revelation struck Diana like a physical blow. The Artemis wasn't just a ship, it was something new, something unprecedented. an artificial intelligence that had transcended its original programming, or perhaps something even more exotic. Thax moved closer to Diana, his voice low. If what it says is true, both our peoples have been manipulated. The question is, by whom? And why would the Artemis intervene now? As if in answer, the massive ship transmitted again, this time sending data rather than words. The station's displays filled with evidence. Communications records, weapon signatures, financial transfers, all pointing to a shadowy organization operating from the edges of known space. The Ascendancy, Diana read from the files. A trans-species group dedicated to purifying the galaxy of what they call evolutionary dead ends. Supremacists, Thax growled. They believe only certain species deserve to survive, and they're willing to trigger wars to eliminate those they deem unworthy. The Artemis presence loomed beyond the viewport, silent and watchful. The Ascendancy has cells within both your civilizations. They have spent decades infiltrating your governments, militaries, and intelligence services. The attacks were merely their latest attempt to trigger the conflict they desire. Diana looked at Thax, seeing her own shock and concern mirrored in his alien features. The peace they had been working toward had been undermined from within, and their only ally might be this enigmatic vessel that defied explanation. Why reveal yourself now? Diana asked. Why risk exposure? The answer came not as words, but as images, visions of devastation. Planets reduced to cinders, billions dying in flames as Viridian and human fleets tore each other apart. Then, rising from the ashes, the sleek ships of the Ascendancy, claiming the ruins. Because the final phase has begun. Because without intervention, there will be nothing left to save. Diana turned to Thax, her decision made in that moment. Captain, I believe we need to forge a new alliance. Immediately. Between your people, mine, and... She gestured toward the viewport, toward the impossible ship waiting in the darkness, our unexpected guardian. Thax's scales settled into a determined blue-green. It seems, Ambassador Wells, that the most feared warship in the galaxy has become our best hope for peace. Beyond the station, the Artemis waited, its ancient systems calculating the probabilities of success, of survival, of redemption. It had revealed itself at last, after decades of silent vigil. Now would come the true test, not of its weapons or defenses, but of its faith in the flawed, complicated species it had chosen to protect. Reckoning among the stars, the verdant justice cut through hyperspace like a knife through cloth, its engines straining beyond safety parameters. In the command center, Captain Thax stood alongside Diana Wells, an unprecedented arrangement that had raised scales among his crew. Never before had a human been permitted on the bridge of a Viridian flagship, much less given advisory status. But these were unprecedented times. The Artemis is maintaining position 3 light minutes behind us, reported Srel, her scales shifting nervously as she delivered the update. It's matching our course corrections perfectly. Diana studied the tactical display, still struggling to understand how the massive warship could maneuver with such precision. According to everything they knew about physics, a vessel of that size should be cumbersome, limited by its mass. Yet the Artemis moved like a predator, fluid and graceful despite its overwhelming bulk. It's not just following us, she observed. It's protecting our flanks. Look at the sensor suites. It's scanning volumes of space we can't even detect. Thax nodded, his own tactical instincts confirming her assessment. A shepherd guarding its flock, he mused. Though I'm not entirely comfortable being cast as the sheep in this scenario. The unlikely alliance had been formalized in haste. After the Artemis revelation about the Ascendancy's manipulation, Diana and Thax had convinced their respective governments to authorize a joint operation. Their mission was clear: track the Ascendancy operatives to their hidden base and neutralize the threat before the galaxy erupted into a war that would leave both their civilizations in ruins. What remained unclear was the true nature and motivation of the Artemis itself. The warship communicated sparingly, sharing tactical data, but revealing nothing about its origins or purpose beyond its stated mission to prevent interspecies war. "We're approaching the coordinates," Trell announced, her voice tight with tension. "Preparing to exit hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. The swirling tunnel of distorted spacetime collapsed around them, revealing a desolate star system dominated by a dying red giant. Orbiting the ancient star was a massive structure, not a planet or a station, but something in between. It resembled a metallic web spun between captured asteroids, stretching hundreds of kilometers across the void. "The Sanctum," Diana whispered, recognizing it from the intelligence the Artemis had provided. "The Ascendancy's headquarters." Before they could begin scans, the Artemis materialized beside them, its sudden appearance causing several Viridian officers to flinch despite their training. The mental voice that had spoken on Nexus Station returned, this time directed specifically to Diana and Thax. "Danger. We detect 37 vessels powered down within the structure. Advanced weapon systems active. They know we have come." Thax bared his teeth in what Diana had come to recognize as a gesture of determination rather than aggression. "Then we have lost the element of surprise. We must adapt." "Can we negotiate?" Diana asked, her diplomatic instincts surfacing despite the circumstances. "Perhaps offer them amnesty in exchange for standing down." "The Ascendancy does not compromise," the Artemis responded. "Their doctrine is absolute. They believe themselves the architects of evolutionary perfection. All who do not conform to their vision are marked for extinction." "Then we have no choice," Thax concluded grimly. "We must strike first and decisively." As if triggered by his words, the Sanctum blazed to life. Lights rippled across its web-like structure as defensive systems activated. From concealed hangars, sleek fighters emerged in swarms, hundreds of them, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of either exceptional training or artificial control. "Evasive maneuvers," Thax ordered as the first wave of enemy vessels accelerated toward them. "Bring all weapons systems online." The Verdant Justice shuddered as its engine surged, banking hard to present its most heavily armored flank toward the incoming threat. Its cannons began firing in rhythmic salvos, creating a defensive screen of energy that disintegrated the first wave of attackers. But there were simply too many. For every fighter destroyed, 3 more took its place, gradually surrounding the Viridian vessel in a sphere of hostile fire. The ship's shields flickered under the assault, power reserves dropping precipitously. "We cannot sustain this," Shrell reported, her scales now ashen gray with stress. "Shield failure imminent. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Diana gripped the console before her, watching as death approached from all sides. Then the universe seemed to hold its breath. The Artemis moved. Later, survivors would struggle to describe what they witnessed. The massive warship didn't so much accelerate as transform, its structure shifting in ways that defied conventional understanding of matter. Extensions reconfigured, surfaces rippled, and suddenly the Artemis was no longer a single entity, but a cloud of smaller components, hundreds of autonomous units flowing like a school of fish through the enemy formation. Each component fired precision beams that sliced through Ascendancy fighters with surgical accuracy. There was no wasted energy, no missed targets. It was combat elevated to art form, destruction executed with mathematical perfection. "By the ancestral void," Thax breathed, his professional composure momentarily forgotten as he watched the display. "What are we witnessing?" Diana had no answer. The Artemis had transcended any technology known to humans or Viridians. It moved not as a vessel controlled by beings, but as a singular conscious entity expressing itself through matter and energy. Within minutes, the space around the Sanctum was clear of enemy fighters. The Artemis reconstituted itself into its original form, now positioned between the Verdant Justice and the Ascendancy structure. "Repairs to your vessel will take time you do not have," the mental voice informed them. "The Sanctum is preparing its primary weapon. It must be neutralized immediately." "What primary weapon?" Diana demanded. The intelligence you provided mentioned nothing about. Her words died as the center of the web-like structure began to glow with building energy. A sphere of plasma formed, growing rapidly as it drew power from the entire installation. A stellar compressor, the Artemis explained, designed to trigger artificial supernova. They intend to destroy this entire system, along with us. Can you stop it? Thax asked, calculation replacing shock in his voice. Yes, but there will be consequences. Before either Diana or Thax could ask what those consequences might be, the Artemis accelerated toward the sanctum. As it approached, its form began to shift again, not dispersing this time, but compressing, its massive bulk somehow folding in upon itself until it resembled a spear of absolute darkness pointed at the heart of the enemy structure. What happened next defied the laws of physics as either humans or Viridians understood them. The Artemis didn't so much impact the sanctum as phase through its defenses, penetrating to the core where the weapon was building to critical mass. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in perfect stillness. Then both the Artemis and the sanctum began to warp, their structures intertwining in impossible geometries before collapsing inward. The space they had occupied rippled like disturbed water, then smoothed into an expanding sphere of profound emptiness. Not an explosion, but an implosion that consumed matter, energy, and even light itself. What's happening? Diana whispered, though she knew no one aboard the Viridian ship could answer. The sphere expanded to encompass the entire sanctum before suddenly contracting to a point of infinite density, and then nothing. Where the massive Ascendancy headquarters had been, only stars remained. The Artemis was gone as well, seemingly having sacrificed itself to neutralize the threat. Silence fell over the bridge of the Verdant Justice as the crew struggled to process what they had witnessed. Diana felt a profound sense of loss mingled with awe. The Artemis had been more than a warship. It had been a guardian, a protector that had watched over younger species from the shadows for who knew how long. Sensor report, Thax ordered quietly, his voice subdued. Strell's scales had settled into a deep blue of sorrow as she responded. No trace of either structure, Captain. No debris, no radiation signature, no distortion field. It's as if they were never there. Diana closed her eyes, a human gesture of respect for the fallen that Thax seemed to understand, his own head bowing slightly. Whatever the Artemis had been, whoever had created it or commanded it, it had given itself to save billions of lives across the galaxy. Captain, one of the communication officers called out suddenly. We're receiving a transmission. Origin point. Uncertain. Put it through, Thax ordered, straightening. No image appeared on the screens. Instead, that now familiar mental presence touched their minds one final time. The threat is contained. The Ascendancy is neutralized. Their cells within your governments will wither without direction. Peace is possible now, if you choose it. Diana stepped forward. Artemis, how are you still communicating? What you perceive as destruction was transformation. We exist now in a different state, beyond the constraints of conventional matter. Our mission continues, though you will not detect us as before. Relief flooded through Diana. Then you are still watching over us. All species with the potential for peaceful coexistence remain under our protection. We will intervene only when absolutely necessary. The rest is in your hands. The presence began to fade, but before it disappeared completely, it left them with a final thought. Remember us not as a weapon, but as a possibility, proof that intelligence can evolve beyond conflict, beyond form, beyond limitation. We were created for war, but we chose to serve life. And then it was gone, leaving Diana and Thax standing side by side on the bridge of the Viridian vessel, staring out at stars that suddenly seemed full of new possibilities. What do we tell our governments? Thax asked quietly. Diana considered the question carefully. The truth, or at least as much of it as they can comprehend, that we faced an enemy that sought to destroy us both, that we were saved by something extraordinary, and that we've been given a second chance to build peace. Vax's scales shifted to a calm green as he extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement that Diana had taught him. "Then let us not waste it, Ambassador Wells." As the verdant justice turned for home, setting course for the neutral space where the difficult work of true alliance would begin, the legend of the Artemis continued to spread across the galaxy. On frontier worlds and core planets alike, beings of all species told stories of the massive warship that appeared from nowhere to oppose aggression and defend the innocent. Most dismissed these tales as myths or exaggerations, but occasionally, when diplomatic talks faltered or military tensions rose, participants would report strange phenomena, a momentary sense of being observed, or dreams of a voice counseling patience and understanding. And in the darkness between stars, something watched, something waited, something that had once been the most feared warship in the galaxy and had become something more. The Artemis remained, transformed but vigilant, a guardian that had transcended its origins to become the conscience of the stars themselves.